In the village of Nyota, where the morning sun painted the clay houses in shades of amber and gold, lived two sisters whose story would be whispered around evening fires for generations to come. Amora and Zora were born under the same thatched roof but seemed to carry different stars in their eyes from the very beginning. Amora, the elder sister, had hands that could coax life from the most stubborn soil and a mind sharp as the harvest moon. Her laughter rang through the marketplace like music, drawing people to her small store where she sold vegetables so fresh they still held morning dew. At 25, she stood tall and proud, her colorful head wrap always tied with precision, each fold representing the ambitions she carefully nurtured. Zora, younger by 2 years, possessed a beauty that made even the village elders pause in their tracks. Her eyes held shadows of distant dreams, and her quiet voice carried traces of songs their grandmother used to sing. But where Amora reached for the sun, Zora seemed to fold inward, like the evening primrose waiting for darkness to bloom. Their paths began to diverge on the day their grandmother, Mama Coco, took her final breath. The old woman, known throughout 3 villages for her wisdom and healing touch, had raised the girls after their parents were lost to the great flood that swept through the valley when they were still small. On her deathbed, she called each sister separately, whispering words that would shape their destinies in ways neither could imagine. To Amora, she said, "My child, your hands are blessed with the gift of growth. Take these seeds." She pressed a small leather pouch into Amora's palm. "Plant them not in the earth, but in the hearts of others. Your path lies in the marketplace, where souls meet and stories intertwine." To Zora, she whispered something different, words that the younger sister would keep locked in her heart like precious beads. The quietest drums often carry the deepest rhythms. Your path will seem harder, but it leads to treasures others cannot see. After Mama Coco's passing, the sisters stood at the first of many crossroads. Amora, clutching her pouch of seeds, chose to apprentice herself to Mama Bintu, the most successful market woman in 3 districts. She worked from sunrise to sunset, learning the delicate dance of trade and trust, of knowing when to hold firm and when to bend like the river reed. Zara chose differently. Within months of their grandmother's passing, she married Jabari, a handsome young man from the neighboring village who had inherited his father's cattle. He promised her a life of security and comfort, speaking of a house with windows that would catch the morning light and children's laughter that would fill their compound. The village elders nodded approvingly at both choices, seeing in them the natural order of things. But beneath the surface, currents of change were already stirring, like underground streams slowly carving new paths through ancient stone. A year passed, and Amora's small market stall grew into 3. Her vegetables were sought after not just for their freshness but for the stories and smiles she gave away freely with each purchase. She remembered every customer's name, knew their children's favorites, anticipated their needs before they spoke them. The seeds her grandmother had given her remained unopened in their pouch, hung around her neck on a leather cord, a constant reminder of promises yet to be fulfilled. Zora's life took a different turn. The house Jabari promised remained unbuilt, their home instead a small room in his father's compound where privacy was as rare as rain in the dry season. Her days filled with the endless tasks of a young wife, fetching water, grinding millet, tending to her in-laws' needs. The songs she used to sing faded into whispers, then into silence. The sisters' meetings grew less frequent, their conversations shorter. Each encounter seemed to highlight the growing distance between them, like shadows lengthening at sunset. Amora would arrive bearing gifts from the market, fresh fruits, special spices, new cloth, her success evident in the quality of her offerings. Zara would accept them with quiet thanks, her eyes never quite meeting her sister's gaze. One particular evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Amora visited her sister, bringing news that would crack the fragile peace between them. She found Zara in the courtyard, grinding millet with movements that spoke of bone-deep weariness. "Sister," Amora called out, her voice bright with barely contained excitement. I've brought you something special today. She held out a package wrapped in banana leaves. Zara paused in her walk, wiping sweat from her brow with the edge of her wrapper. You are too kind, sister. Always bringing gifts. This one is different, Amora said, settling beside her sister on the grinding stone. Do you remember how Mama Coco used to say that good fortune should be shared like water in the dry season? Zara nodded, her hands reflexively continuing their walk with the grinding stone. Well, Amora continued, the gods have blessed me beyond measure. My business has grown so much that I'm opening a new stall in the big market at Kotu. And she paused, her smile widening, I want you to come walk with me. The grinding stone stopped. Silence fell between them, heavy as the afternoon heat. Walk with you? Zora's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Think of it, sister. Like when we were girls, helping Mama Coco with her herbs. We could be together again, building something of our own. Zora's hands tightened on the grinding stone. And what of my duties here? My husband. His family. Should I abandon them like scattered corn in the wind? Not abandon, Amara rushed to explain, but surely they would understand. You could earn your own money, help build that house Jabari promised. Stop. Zora's voice cut through the air like a machete through young bamboo. Just stop, Amara. Not everyone can be like you, always reaching for more, never satisfied with their place. That's not what isn't it? Zara stood, her shadow falling across her sister. You come here with your fine wrapper and your successful business, offering me charity like I'm one of your poor customers. But I have my place, sister. I have my duties. Zara, please listen. No, you listen. Zara's voice trembled. Mama Coco told me my path would be different from yours. She said some treasures can't be bought in the marketplace or measured in coins. You have your seeds to plant, sister. Let me tend to mine. The marketplace of Nyota came alive each morning before the sun could stretch its golden fingers across the horizon. Among the early risers was Mama Bintu, her massive frame moving with surprising grace as she arranged her wares. She watched with knowing eyes as Amora approached through the morning mist, carrying baskets laden with fresh produce. You're late today, my daughter, Mama Bintu called out, though they both knew Amora was early as always. It had become their morning ritual, this gentle teasing, as familiar as the cock's crow at dawn. Forgive me, Mama, Amora replied with a smile, setting down her baskets. The yams were arguing with me this morning. They didn't want to leave their bed of earth. Mama Bintu's laugh rolled through the empty marketplace like distant thunder. Oh, you've learned well. Always tell stories with your sales. But today, she paused, her face growing serious, today I see shadows in your eyes darker than the bottom of my cooking pot. Amora's hands stilled over the yams she was arranging. For a moment, she considered deflecting with another joke, but Mama Bintu had taught her that truth, like palm oil, always rises to the surface. It's my sister, Mama, Amora confessed. Yesterday, I offered her a place in my new stall at Kotu Market, but her response. She shook her head, unable to find words for the pain that had lodged in her throat like an unripe fruit. Mama Bintu settled her considerable weight onto her low wooden stool, patting the empty one beside her. Come, sit. The sun is not yet awake, and this is the time for stories that need telling. As Amora sat, Mama Bintu reached into her wrapper and pulled out a small calabash. Do you know why I chose you as my apprentice? She asked, opening the calabash to reveal kola nuts nestled inside. Because I was hardworking. Amora ventured, accepting a piece of the bitter nut. Huh. Mama Bintu's laugh scattered a few drowsy pigeons. Child, half the girls in this village are hardworking. No, I chose you because you reminded me of my own sister, Adana. This was new. In all their years together, Mama Bintu had never mentioned having a sister. Amora leaned forward, the morning's tasks momentarily forgotten. Adana was like your Zora, beautiful, traditional, certain of her place in the world. I was the odd one, always trading and bargaining even as a child. I would trade my dinner for pretty beads, then trade the beads for a chicken, the chicken for a goat, until our mother declared I would trade away my own head if it wasn't family attached. Mama Bintu's voice took on a distant quality, like she was speaking from the depths of memory itself. When I started my market business, I too offered Adana a place beside me. Like your sister, she refused. But unlike you, I didn't understand. I pushed, insisted, tried to force her to see life through my eyes. And do you know what happened? Amora shook her head, the bitter taste of cola nut mixing with anticipation on her tongue. She disappeared. One morning, she was simply gone. Left her husband, her home, everything. We found out later she had joined a group of traveling performers, singing songs that made grown men weep and women dance with joy. It was her calling, you see, just as the market was mine. But because I couldn't accept her path, I lost her twice, first to her marriage, then to her dreams. The morning air seemed to grow heavier with the weight of Mama Bintu's words. In the distance, the first real stirrings of market day began, the clatter of wooden stalls being set up, the bleating of goats being led to their pens, the calls of early vendors. But surely, Amora protested, wanting to help our sisters rise is not wrong. Oh, but who defines what rising looks like? Mama Bintu countered, her wise eyes twinkling. The bird and the fish both rise each morning, but if you tell the fish to rise like a bird, it will drown. She reached out and touched the leather pouch hanging from Amora's neck. Your grandmother gave you seeds, yes. But did she tell you they must all grow into the same plant? Amora's hand flew to the pouch, feeling the familiar shape of the seeds within. No, she admitted. She only said to plant them in the hearts of others. Then perhaps, Mama Bintu suggested gently, you should learn what grows naturally in your sister's heart before trying to plant your own seeds there. The market was fully awake now, the air thick with the sounds and smells of commerce. But Amora sat still, letting her mentor's words sink deep into her consciousness like water into parched earth. Now, Mama Bintu said, rising with a grunt, enough philosophy. The real secret of the marketplace isn't in what we sell, but in what we learn from each person who passes our store. Watch your sister as carefully as you watch your customers, and you may discover she's already growing something beautiful, just in a different garden than yours. As the day progressed, Amora found herself watching her customers with new eyes. There was Mama Yejide, who bought the smallest yams but whose children were known throughout the village for their beautiful singing. There was old Papa Kumi, who spent hours tending his tiny plot of medicinal herbs, healing people's spirits as much as their bodies. Each person who stopped at her store carried their own dreams, their own measure of success. When the sun reached its zenith, Amora made a decision. She carefully selected the finest vegetables from her store, not as a gift this time, but as an offering of understanding. She would visit Zara again, not to change her sister's path, but to learn where it led. As she packed her basket, Mama Bintu called out, remember, child, some flowers bloom at night, others in the day. Both are beautiful, both are necessary. Amora nodded, the seeds in her pouch feeling lighter somehow. But as she turned to leave the market, a commotion erupted near the entrance. People were running, shouting, their voices carrying news that would change everything. Jabari, Zora's husband, had been gored by one of his father's bulls. The vegetables tumbled from Amora's basket as she began to run, her feet carrying her toward her sister's compound. The seeds around her neck bounced against her chest with each step, their rhythm like a distant drum calling her toward a destiny neither sister had foreseen. Behind her, Mama Bintu watched her go, murmuring an ancient prayer, "May the paths that lead away from each other sometimes be the very ones that lead us home." The secret of the marketplace, she knew, was that every transaction carried within it the possibility of transformation. As she turned back to her store, she wondered if perhaps Mama Coco's seeds were finally ready to show what they could grow. The sun climbed higher in the sky, watching over Nyota like a patient elder, waiting to see how love and understanding might bloom in the most unexpected places. For in this village, as in life itself, the greatest secrets were often hidden in plain sight, waiting for hearts ready to receive them. The news of Jabari's accident spread through Nyota like wildfire in the dry season. By the time Amara reached her sister's compound, a crowd had already gathered, their whispers rising and falling like evening winds through the baobab trees. Zora stood in the courtyard, her face a mask of stone as the village women tried to comfort her. Her wrapper, still dusty from the morning's grinding, was pulled tight around her shoulders as if to shield her from the weight of sympathetic gazes. "Sister," Amara called out softly, pushing through the crowd. When Zora turned, the mask cracked just slightly, revealing a flash of relief before hardening again. "They've taken him to the hospital in Kotu," Zora said, her voice steady but distant. "Father-in-law went with him in the trader's truck. They wouldn't let me go." The last words carried a bitter edge that only Amara could detect. Without hesitation, Amara took her sister's hand. "Then we will go together. I know people in Kotu, and I have money saved." "No." Zara pulled her hand away. "I don't need your money or your connections, sister. What I need is to be a good wife and wait here, as my mother-in-law says I should." But even as she spoke these words, both sisters remembered a different lesson from their grandmother. A woman's strength lies not in her patience, but in knowing when patience has served its purpose. As the crowd slowly dispersed, disappointed that no immediate drama would unfold, Amara remained. She watched as Zora mechanically went about her evening tasks, feeding the chickens, sweeping the compound, preparing the evening meal for her in-laws who hadn't even bothered to tell her if her husband would live or die. Finally, as the sun began to set, Zora spoke again. "Do you remember, sister, when Mama Coco taught us about the 3 types of fortune?" Amara nodded, settling beside her sister on the wooden bench their grandfather had carved long ago. "The fortune we are born with, the fortune we earn, and the fortune we create from misfortune," Zora finished. She reached into her wrapper and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "Before she died, Mama Coco gave me something too, not just you with your precious seeds." Amara's hand instinctively went to her leather pouch as Zora carefully unwrapped her package, revealing a small mirror made of polished bronze, its surface decorated with ancient symbols. "She told me to look in it not to see my face, but to see my truth," Zora continued. "For months, I've seen nothing but a dutiful wife, a proper daughter-in-law, exactly what everyone expected me to be. But today..." She turned the mirror in her hands, its surface catching the last rays of sunlight. "Today I saw something different." "What did you see?" Amara asked, leaning closer. "I saw Mama Coco smile. The one she wore when she was about to do something that would make the elders talk for weeks." A small, defiant smile played at the corners of Zora's mouth. "I need your help, sister. Not your money, not your pity, but your strength." Amara felt the seeds in her pouch shift, as if responding to some invisible change in the air. "Whatever you need, sister." "I'm going to Kotu tonight," Zara declared. Not as a disobedient wife or a rebellious daughter-in-law, but as a woman claiming her right to stand beside her husband. "And if they try to send me away?" Her grip tightened on the mirror. "Then perhaps it's time to see what other reflections it might show." As the sisters made their plans in whispers, the compound around them grew quiet. Inside, their mother-in-law held court with visiting relatives, her voice carrying through the thin walls. Such a useless wife, not even able to give my son a child before this tragedy. Zara flinched at the words, but her resolve didn't waver. They blame me for everything, she whispered. The lack of children, the bad harvest, even Jabari's restlessness. As if my presence in their lives is a curse rather than a blessing. Amora thought of Mama Bintu's words about birds and fish, about different ways of rising. Perhaps, she suggested carefully, this is the fortune you can create from misfortune. Not just going to Kotu, but finding your own way to shine. As darkness fell, the sisters put their plan into action. Amora had friends among the night traders who traveled to Kotu's dawn market. A few quiet words, a careful exchange of coins, and space was made in a truck already loaded with yams and cassava. Before they left, Zara changed into her best wrapper, the one she'd saved for special occasions that never seemed to come. She tucked Mama Coco's mirror into her waist and stood straighter than Amora had seen her stand in years. The elders say that fortune is like a shy antelope, Zara mused as they climbed into the truck. You can't chase it, you must let it come to you. But Mama Coco used to say that sometimes you have to clear the path for fortune to find you, Amora countered, settling beside her sister among the yams. As the truck rumbled to life, carrying them away from Nyota and toward an uncertain future, neither sister noticed the strange way their grandmother's gifts seemed to glow in the darkness, the seeds in their pouch and the symbols on the mirror catching starlight that shouldn't have been able to reach them. The night air was thick with the scent of adventure and possibility. Other traders in the truck shared their food and their stories, each adding to the sisters' growing sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. One old trader, her face lined with the wisdom of countless journeys, studied them thoughtfully. You know, she said, her voice barely audible above the truck's engine, there's an old saying in my village, when sisters travel together, even the gods pause to watch their journey. The road to Kotu was long and rough, each bump and turn testing their resolve. But with each mile that passed, Zara seemed to grow stronger, more certain. She held her grandmother's mirror up to the moonlight, and for a moment, both sisters could have sworn they saw not their own reflections, but visions of possibilities yet to unfold. Do you think we are doing the right thing? Zara asked softly as the lights of Kotu began to appear in the distance. Amora touched her pouch of seeds, feeling their familiar weight. I think we are doing the necessary thing. And sometimes, sister, that's even more important than doing the right thing. As they approached the city, the whispers of fortune that had brought them this far seemed to gather around them like a protective cloak. For in this moment, they were neither the successful market woman nor the dutiful wife, they were simply sisters, carrying their grandmother's gifts toward a destiny that would soon begin to bloom in ways neither could imagine. The truck rode into Kotu just as the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky. The city was already stirring, its energy different from the gentle awakening of Nyota. Here, everything seemed possible, every corner held the promise of a new beginning. Ready? Amora asked, helping her sister down from the truck. Zara clutched her mirror, squared her shoulders, and nodded. Ready to create our own fortune, sister. Together, they walked into the awakening city, their grandmother's gifts guiding them toward whatever fate awaited them at the hospital. Behind them, the old trader watched them go, a knowing smile on her weathered face. For she, like the gods themselves, knew that when sisters stand together, even destiny must pause to reconsider its course. The hospital in Kotu stood like a weathered sentinel at the edge of the city, its white walls turned grey by years of dust and rain. Inside, the sisters found chaos, nurses rushing through crowded hallways, families huddled in corners, the air thick with worry and antiseptic. Jabari's father sat alone on a metal bench, his proud shoulders now bent with worry. When he saw Zora, his expression darkened like storm clouds gathering over distant hills. Who allowed you to come here? He demanded, rising to his full height. "Did I not tell you to wait at home?" Before Zara could respond, Amora stepped forward. "With respect, father, your son's wife has every right to be here. The gods themselves would expect no less." The old man's eyes narrowed, taking in Amora's fine wrapper and the confident way she carried herself. "Oh, the market woman," he said, his voice heavy with disapproval. "Always ready with clever words. But clever words won't help my son now." "No," Zara spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "But love might. And duty. And the strength that comes from family standing together." As she spoke, she pulled out Mama Coco's mirror, its surface catching the harsh hospital lights and casting strange patterns on the wall. For a moment, something flickered in the old man's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or memory. He sat back down heavily, suddenly looking very tired. "The doctors say he may never walk properly again," he admitted. "The bull, it did more damage than we thought." Zara moved to sit beside him, while Amora remained standing, her hand unconsciously touching the pouch of seeds at her neck. The three of them formed an uneasy triangle of silence, broken only by the bustling sounds of the hospital around them. Then a nurse appeared, her white uniform crisp despite the late hour. "Are you the wife?" she asked, looking at Zara. When Zara nodded, the nurse's face softened. "He's been asking for you. Come." As Zara stood to follow the nurse, her father-in-law caught her wrist. "Remember," he warned, "a wife's duty is to bring hope, not burden." Zara gently pulled free. "And a father's duty?" she asked, leaving the question hanging in the air between them as she walked away. Alone with Jabari's father, Amora felt the weight of unspoken words press down like heavy rain. She thought of Mama Bintu's wisdom about different paths to rising, and took a risk. "Did you know our grandmother?" she asked carefully. "Mama Coco." The old man's head snapped up, surprise breaking through his stern facade. "Everyone knew Mama Coco," he said gruffly. "She was." He paused, searching for words. "She saw things others didn't." "Like what?" "Like the truth behind the faces we show the world." He gestured vaguely at the mirror Zara had left behind on the bench. "I recognized that mirror. It belonged to my own grandmother once, before she gave it to Mama Coco. It's said to show not just reflections, but possibilities." Amora sat down beside him, her curiosity piqued. "And these possibilities, are they fixed? Or can they change?" The old man gave a bitter laugh. "Nothing is fixed, market woman. That's what makes life so dangerous. And so precious." He looked down the hallway where Zara had disappeared. "My son, he wanted different things than I planned for him. Maybe that's why the bull." His voice trailed off. Meanwhile, Zara followed the nurse to a small room where Jabari lay surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed like mechanical crickets. His usually strong body looked small and broken under the white hospital sheets. When he opened his eyes and saw her, tears began to flow freely down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Zara rushed to his side, taking his hand. "For what?" "For not being strong enough. For not building you that house I promised. For letting my father." He coughed, wincing in pain. "SHHH," Zara soothed, but Jabari shook his head. "No, let me speak. The bull, when it charged, I wasn't thinking about the cattle or my father's reputation. I was thinking about you, about how I'd failed you. I was distracted because earlier that day, I'd finally saved enough money to buy land for our house. I wanted to surprise you." Zara felt something shift inside her, like earth breaking open to receive rain. She pulled out Mama Coco's mirror and held it so they both could see their reflection. In the polished bronze surface, their faces seemed to blur and change, showing not what was, but what could be. "Look," she whispered. really look. In the mirror's depths, they saw flashes of possibility, a small house with windows that caught the morning light, a garden where healing herbs grew alongside vegetables, children's laughter mixing with the sound of distant drums. But more than that, they saw themselves, not as others had defined them, but as they truly were. Back in the hallway, Amora and Jabari's father continued their unlikely conversation. The old man spoke of his own father, of expectations handed down like heavy chains from generation to generation. Amora listened, her fingers playing with the seeds in her pouch. Sometimes, she said carefully, what we inherit is not what we are meant to pass on. The old man looked at her sharply. And what would a market woman know about inheritance? Amora opened her pouch, showing him the seeds that gleamed with an almost otherworldly light. These were Mama Coco's last gift to me. She said to plant them not in earth, but in hearts. Perhaps. She hesitated, then continued boldly, perhaps some hearts are ready for new growth. Before he could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Zora emerged from Jabari's room, her face wet with tears but her eyes shining with something that looked like hope. He wants to see you, father, she said. He has something to tell you. The old man stood slowly, years of tradition and pride warring with love on his weathered face. At the door to his son's room, he paused. Your grandmother, he said, not turning around. She once told me that the greatest strength is knowing when to bend so we don't break. With that, he entered the room, closing the door behind him. Zora collapsed onto the bench beside her sister, emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter. Everything's going to change now, isn't it? Amora took her sister's hand, feeling the seeds in her pouch pulse with warmth. Everything already has. As dawn began to paint the hospital windows with stripes of gold, the sisters sat together, holding their grandmother's gifts and waiting for whatever new day would bring. For they had learned that sometimes the greatest celebrations are not the ones we plan, but the moments when truth finally breaks through the soil of our lives. Reaching for light, word traveled fast between Kotu and Nyota, carried on winds of whispers and speculation. By the time the morning sun had risen fully, the news of Zora's midnight journey had reached the village, causing a stir that rippled through the community like stones thrown in still water. At the edge of Nyota, where the forest began its ancient march toward the mountains, lived Boba Mosshood, the oldest elder in 3 villages. His compound was marked by a massive Iroko tree, its branches reaching toward the sky like gnarled fingers seeking wisdom from the clouds. It was to this compound that the sister's mother-in-law, Mama Aduk, came seeking counsel. Boba Mosshood sat in his courtyard, his white hair gleaming like cotton balls in the morning light. Before him lay cowrie shells scattered in patterns only he could read. As Mama Aduk approached, the old man spoke without looking up. I've been expecting you, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The shells spoke of sisters and seeds before you left your house this morning. Mama Aduk settled herself on the mat before him, her face tight with worry and indignation. Then you know why I've come, Boba. That girl, Zora, has brought shame to our family. Running off in the night like a thief, and her sister. Oh, Boba Mosshood interrupted, picking up a cowrie shell and holding it to the light. The sister with the seeds. Tell me, have you seen them? The seeds that Mama Coco left behind. Seeds. Mama Aduk frowned. What do seeds have to do with this disgrace? The old man's laugh was like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Everything and nothing. Just as your anger has everything and nothing to do with your son's accident. He picked up another shell, studying it intently. You fear change more than you fear disgrace. I fear nothing, Mama Aduk declared, though her hands twisted nervously in her wrapper. I came for your counsel on how to handle this situation. The whole village is talking. Let them talk, Boba Mosshood said, suddenly serious. But listen carefully to my warning, daughter of dawn, there are forces at work here older than your traditions, deeper than your pride. He reached into a leather bag beside him and pulled out a handful of earth, letting it sift through his fingers. Mama Coco was not just any healer. She was a keeper of ancient wisdom, a guardian of balance. Those gifts she left behind, the seeds and the mirror, they are not mere trinkets. What do you mean? Mama Aduk leaned forward despite herself. The seeds are meant to grow truth, and the mirror is meant to reflect it. But, he paused, his eyes distant, truth is a dangerous crop when planted in poisoned soil. And reflections can blind as easily as they illuminate. In the hospital in Kotu, at that very moment, Amora felt her pouch of seeds grow unexpectedly warm against her skin. She pulled them out, gasping softly as she saw them glowing with a faint, pulsing light. Zara, dozing in the chair beside her, awakened at her sister's movement. What's wrong? Before Amora could answer, an old woman appeared in the doorway of the hospital waiting room. Her wrapper was faded but clean, and her eyes held the same knowing look they remembered from their grandmother. The seeds are awakening, the old woman said simply. Just as Mama Coco said they would. Back in Nyota, Baba Moshood continued his warning. There was a time, he told Mama Aduk, when our people understood the language of seeds and shadows. When we knew that every mirror held not just reflections, but doorways. Mama Coco was one of the last who remembered these truths. He gathered the cowrie shells in his hands, then cast them again. Their new pattern made him frown. The seeds your daughter-in-law's sister carries, they are seeking soil. And the mirror, it's beginning to remember its power. But there are others who would use such gifts for their own purposes. What others? Mama Aduk asked, her earlier anger giving way to unease. Those who deal in shadows, Baba Moshood replied cryptically. Those who would rather see ancient wisdom buried than blooming. He fixed her with a penetrating stare. Your own bitterness, woman, could give them the opening they seek. In Kotu, the mysterious old woman had settled herself between the sisters, her presence somehow making the sterile hospital waiting room feel like a sacred space. Your grandmother, she said softly, was my sister in ways deeper than blood. We were both chosen to guard the old wisdom, to keep alive the knowledge that others would forget. She gestured to Amara's seeds and Zora's mirror. These gifts are keys, but they are also locks. They protect as much as they reveal. Protect what? Zara asked, unconsciously clutching her mirror tighter. The old woman's smile was gentle but sad. The truth of who we are. Not just as individuals, but as a people. The seeds, when planted in worthy hearts, grow understanding of our deeper selves. The mirror, when gazed into by honest eyes, reflects not just what is, but what must be. Back in Nyota, Baba Moshood was delivering the heart of his warning to Mama Aduk. A time of choosing approaches, he declared, reading the patterns in his cowrie shells. The sisters must plant and reflect with wisdom, or the gifts could become curses. And you, he pointed a gnarled finger at her, you must decide whether to be fertile soil or choking weed. What would you have me do? Mama Aduk asked, her voice small. Remember, he said simply. Remember that before you were a mother-in-law, before you were a guardian of tradition, you were a girl who once looked into a mirror much like the one Zora carries. Remember what you saw then, and what you chose to forget. Mama Aduk's face paled. How did you know about? The shells know what the heart remembers, Baba Moshood interrupted. Now go. But remember my warning, the seeds will find soil somewhere. Better it be in gardens we tend than in shadows we fear. As Mama Aduk hurried away from the elders' compound, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of approaching rain. In Kotu, the mysterious old woman was also preparing to leave the sisters. Watch for signs, she told them. The seeds will glow brighter when truth needs planting. The mirror will warm when reality needs facing. But be careful, there are those who would twist such gifts to their own purposes. Who? Amora asked, echoing Mama Aduk's earlier question. The old woman's eyes grew distant. Those who fear the power of sisters standing together. Those who would rather see ancient wisdom die than change their ways. She stood, her movements graceful despite her age. Remember, the greatest danger to a seed is not drought, but doubt. And the greatest threat to a reflection is not darkness, but denial. As she walked away, both sisters felt their grandmother's gift pulse with power, the seeds glowing like captured starlight, the mirror surface rippling like disturbed water. They looked at each other, understanding dawning in their eyes. Their midnight journey to Kotu had been more than an act of defiance. It had been the first step on a path their grandmother had prepared for them long ago. A path that would lead them not just to healing their family's wounds, but to awakening something ancient and powerful that slept in the heart of their world. Thunder roared in the distance, promising rain and change. In Nyota, Baba Moshood gathered his cowrie shells, whispering prayers to ancestors only he could name. In Kotu, the sisters held their gifts and waited, knowing that the real journey was only beginning. For in this land where magic still whispered in the wind and wisdom still hid in plain sight, the time had come for seeds of truth to find their soil and reflections of destiny to claim their power. The warning had been given. Now, the choosing would begin. The rain began just as the sun reached its highest point, falling not in the gentle drops of a normal afternoon shower, but in sheets that turned the hospital's windows into waterfalls. As nurses rushed to close windows and patients huddled in their beds, a woman walked through the hospital's main entrance, completely dry despite the downpour outside. She moved with the fluid grace of a river finding its path, her indigo robes decorated with patterns that seemed to shift and change like clouds in the wind. Her hair was wrapped in a cloth of the same deep blue, marked with silver symbols that matched those on Zora's mirror. The sisters, still sitting in the waiting area, felt their grandmother's gift respond to her presence before they saw her, Amora's seeds pulsing with warm light, Zora's mirror growing hot in her hands. When the woman passed them, time seemed to slow, the hospital sounds fading to a distant hum. Daughters of Mama Coco, she said, her voice carrying the sound of rain on distant hills. I am Aisha, child of the last true rainmaker. And we have much to discuss. Back in Nyota, Baba Moshood stood beneath his Iroko tree, watching the unusual rain with knowing eyes. So, he murmured to himself, she has finally come. In the hospital, Aisha led the sisters to a small courtyard that somehow remained dry despite the torrential rain surrounding it. She settled onto a bench, gesturing for them to join her. Your grandmother, she began, was more than a healer. She was part of an ancient circle of guardians, women who kept the balance between the seen and unseen world. My father, the rainmaker, worked with her for many years. Amora and Zora exchanged glances, remembering how their grandmother could always predict when rain would come, how her herbs seemed to heal not just bodies but spirits. The gift she left you, Aisha continued, gesturing to the seeds and mirror, are part of that legacy. But they are also a responsibility. A test. A test of what? Amora asked, feeling the seeds grow warmer in their pouch. Of whether you are ready to see the truth that lies beneath the surface of things. Aisha's eyes seemed to reflect the rain that fell around their dry sanctuary. Your midnight journey here was just the beginning. The real challenge lies ahead. She turned to Zora. That mirror you carry, it belonged to a long line of truth-seers. Women who could look into its depths and see not just reflections, but revelations. Your mother-in-law once gazed into it, long ago, when she was younger than you are now. Mama Aduk. Zora whispered in disbelief. Yes. She saw her true path that day, but fear made her turn away from it. That's why she fights so hard against change now, because she remembers what it feels like to deny one's own truth. The rain intensified, creating a curtain of water around their dry sanctuary. Aisha reached out and took one of Amora's seeds, holding it up to the hidden sun. In her hand, it glowed like a captured star. These seeds, she explained, grow gardens of understanding in the heart. But they can only be planted in soil prepared by honesty and watered with tears of true feeling. Your sister's wife holds such soil in her heart, though she doesn't know it yet. At that moment, in Jabari's hospital room, Mama Aduk sat beside her son's bed, lost in memories she had long tried to forget. She remembered the day she looked into a mirror much like Zora's, how it had shown her a path of power and wisdom she had been too afraid to follow. Back in the courtyard, Aisha continued her revelation. But there are others who would use these gifts for their own purposes. Those who deal in shadows and half-truths, who would rather see the old wisdom die than let it change their comfortable world. The shadow dealers, Amora remembered the old woman's warning. Who are they? Aisha's face grew grave. They are those who have forgotten that true power comes from growth, not control. They gather in secret, using twisted versions of the old magic to maintain their grip on tradition. And they have felt the awakening of your gifts. As if in response to her words, dark clouds gathered above the hospital, turning the afternoon as dark as twilight. But in their dry courtyard, a strange light emanated from the sisters' gifts, pushing back the shadows. Tonight, Aisha said, they will try to stop what has been set in motion. They will come in dreams first, offering easier paths, simpler choices. But remember, the seeds must be planted where truth has prepared the soil, and the mirror must be used to reflect what is real, not what is easy. She stood, her indigo robe swirling like storm clouds. Your grandmother knew this time would come. She chose you both, not despite your differences, but because of them. One to plant, one to reflect. Together, you can restore what was broken long ago. What was broken? Zara asked, clutching her mirror. The bridge between what we are and what we could be. Between the wisdom of the past and the needs of the present. Aisha's voice grew soft, almost lost in the sound of rain. Your grandmother was the last of our generation to carry this knowledge openly. Now it falls to you to decide, will you plant and reflect with courage, or will you let fear bury the old wisdom forever? Thunder cracked overhead, and for a moment, the sisters saw other figures in the rain, women in indigo robes, carrying seeds and mirrors, their faces both ancient and familiar. Then the vision was gone, leaving them alone with Aisha in their dry sanctuary. The next few days will test you both, she warned. The shadow dealers will try to turn you against each other, to make you doubt what you know to be true. But remember, seeds grow strongest in pairs, and mirrors reflect clearest when held by loving hands. She reached into her robes and pulled out 2 small pouches, giving one to each sister. When the time comes, you'll know what these contain and how to use them. For now, keep them close and trust what your hearts tell you. As suddenly as she had appeared, Aisha stepped into the curtain of rain and vanished, leaving the sisters alone in their dry courtyard. Slowly, the rain began to ease, and the normal sounds of the hospital returned. Amora opened her pouch to find a handful of earth that sparkled like crushed stars. Zora's contained what looked like drops of silver rain, somehow held solid in her palm. What do we do now? Zara whispered, looking at her sister. Amora felt her grandmother's seeds pulse with warmth, as if in answer. We do what Mama Coco taught us, she said firmly. We trust in what we know is true, and we face what comes together. The rain finally stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean and waiting. In Nyota, Baba Mosshood looked up at clearing skies and nodded slowly. The rainmaker's daughter has spoken, he murmured. Now we wait to see if they are truly their grandmother's heirs. For in this land where magic still lived in the spaces between breaths and wisdom still danced in the corners of dreams, a new chapter was beginning. The seeds were ready for planting, the mirror prepared for truth, and the sisters stood at the edge of a destiny their grandmother had seen long ago. The time of choosing had begun. Night fell over Kotu like a heavy velvet cloth, bringing with it a darkness deeper than usual. In Jabari's hospital room, the sisters kept vigil, their grandmother's gifts glowing faintly in the shadows. The star-speckled earth and solid raindrops from Aisha sat between them, gleaming with their own inner light. The first sign that something was wrong came when the hospital lights began to flicker. Not all at once, but in a pattern that moved like a wave through the corridors, as if something unseen was passing through the building's veins. "They are coming," Zara whispered, feeling her mirror grow warm against her skin. In its surface, she caught glimpses of dark shapes moving through the hospital halls, their forms more suggestion than substance. Amora's seeds pulsed with urgent light. "We need to protect Jabari," she said, reaching for the pouch of starlit earth. But before she could move, a voice spoke from the doorway, familiar yet strange, like honey mixed with poison. "Protect him." From what? Mama Aduk stepped into the room, but something was wrong with her shadow. It moved independently of her body, stretching and twisting along the walls. From the truth about his wife's disobedience. From the shame she's brought to our family. "Those aren't your words," Amora said firmly, remembering Aisha's warning about the shadow dealers. "They've taken your fear and turned it into their weapon." The air in the room grew thick and heavy, like smoke from a dying fire. More figures appeared behind Mama Aduk, men and women from the village, their shadows riding and merging into something dark and ancient. "We are the keepers of tradition," they spoke in unison, their voices echoing with unnatural resonance. "We maintain the order that has kept our people strong for generations. These gifts you carry threaten everything we've built." Zara held up her mirror, and in its surface, the truth became clear. The shadow dealers weren't just using Mama Aduk, they were feeding off her buried regrets, her abandoned dreams, her fear of change. They had taken root in her denied truth like parasites in a mighty tree. "Show her," Aisha's voice whispered in Zara's mind. "Show her what she once saw." With trembling hands, Zara turned the mirror toward her mother-in-law. Its surface rippled like disturbed water, then showed a scene from long ago, a young Mama Aduk standing before the same mirror, seeing herself as a powerful healer and leader, carrying forward the old wisdom in new ways. But then came the moment of fear, the turning away, the choice to conform rather than transform. "Remember," Zara said softly. "Remember what you were meant to be." Mama Aduk's face contorted with emotion. The shadows around her twisted violently, trying to maintain their hold, but the light from the mirror cut through their darkness like a knife through cloth. Meanwhile, Amara felt her grandmother's seeds practically jumping in their pouch. Understanding dawned, this was the soil they had been waiting for. Not physical earth, but the fertile ground of a heart ready to bloom again. She took one of the seeds and pressed it into Mama Aduk's palm, along with a pinch of the star-speckled earth Aisha had given her. "Plant it," she urged. "Plant it in the truth you've kept buried all these years." The shadow dealers surged forward, their forms merging into a mass of riding darkness. "You would destroy everything we protect," they howled. "You would let chaos rule where order once reigned." "No," came a new voice, strong and clear. Jabari had awakened, his eyes bright with fever and understanding. They would let growth rule where stagnation has reigned. Something shifted in the air, like a key turning in an ancient lock. Mama Aduk looked down at the seed in her palm, glowing against the starlit earth. A single tear fell from her eye, landing on the seed, and suddenly, light exploded through the room. The shadows screamed, their forms shredding like mist in strong sunlight. In their place stood the truth they had tried to hide, not chaos, but transformation. Not destruction, but renewal. Mama Aduk swayed on her feet as the shadows released their hold on her. The seed in her palm had sprouted, growing into a tiny plant that glowed with inner light. In Zora's mirror, reflections of past and present merged, showing the path forward with crystal clarity. I remember, Mama Aduk whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I remember everything they made me forget. But the victory was not complete. As the shadow dealers retreated, their voices lingered like smoke in the air. This is only the beginning. There are others who fear change as much as she did. We will find them, use them, turn their fear into our strength. Aisha appeared in the doorway, her indigo robe swirling with power. They speak truth in this, at least, she said gravely. Tonight was only the first battle. The storm is still gathering. Outside the hospital windows, clouds began to mass again, their shapes strange and threatening. Lightning flickered within them, revealing glimpses of faces both ancient and angry. The shadow dealers will return, Aisha continued, moving to stand between the sisters. They will try to turn the whole village against you, using the same fears they used on your mother-in-law. But now you know their weakness. Truth, Zara said, looking at her mirror. And growth, Amora added, touching her pouch of seeds. And love, Jabari spoke from his bed, reaching for his mother's hand. They have no defense against love freely given and truth freely faced. Mama Aduk straightened her shoulders, the tiny glowing plant in her palm taking root in her heart. Then we must prepare the others, she said with new strength. I am not the only one who turned away from their truth. There are others in the village who made the same choice I did, who let fear bury their gifts. Thunder roared overhead, but this time it carried a note of promise rather than threat. The sisters looked at each other, understanding dawning in their eyes. This was why their grandmother had given them different gifts, not to divide them, but to make them stronger together. Aisha nodded approvingly. Now you begin to see the full scope of your task. It's not just about healing one family's wounds or preserving old wisdom. It's about helping others find the courage to face their own reflections and plant their own gardens of truth. She turned to leave, then paused. But remember, the shadow dealers will not give up easily. They have fed on fear and denial for generations. They will try to turn your gifts against you, to make you doubt their power and your purpose. How do we stop them? Amara asked. By remembering that darkness, no matter how deep, cannot extinguish light. It can only hide it. Aisha's form began to fade like morning mist. Your grandmother knew this. It's why she chose you both. Together, you are stronger than any shadow. As she vanished, the storm clouds overhead began to disperse, revealing stars that seemed to shine with unusual brightness. But in the distance, lightning still flickered, promising more battles to come. The sisters settled in for the rest of the night watch, their gifts glowing steadily in the darkness. Between them, Mama Aduk sat straight and proud, the tiny luminous plant in her palm a beacon of hope and redemption. For in this night of shadows and revelations, the first seeds of change had been planted, the first true reflections faced. The season of storms had truly begun, but with it came the promise of growth, of healing, of truth finally breaking free from the soil of fear. The shadow dealers had been driven back, but not defeated. As dawn approached, both sisters knew that bigger challenges lay ahead. But they were ready now, understanding at last the full power of their grandmother's gifts and the true meaning of her final legacy. Dawn broke over Kotu Hospital like a fever breaking, bringing with it an unseasonal mist that clung to the windows and turned the world outside into a painting of soft edges and muted colors. Inside Jabari's room, the sisters woke from their uneasy sleep to find Mama Aduk gone, leaving behind only the faintly glowing plant that had sprouted from Amora's seed. She left this, Zara said, picking up a folded piece of paper from beside the plant. Her hands trembled as she read aloud, "Gone to see Baba Mosswood. There are things hidden in his compound that belonged to your grandmother. Things you need to know." Amora touched her pouch of seeds, feeling their warmth respond to her touch. "Then we should go too." "I'll be fine," Jabari assured them from his bed, looking stronger than he had the night before. "The shadows won't return here. They've lost their hold on this place." The journey back to Nyota felt different in the morning light. The trader's truck that carried them seemed to move through layers of time as well as space, each mile bringing them closer to understanding their grandmother's true legacy. They found Mama Aduk waiting for them at the edge of Baba Mosswood's compound. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes shone with a clarity they had never seen before. "Your grandmother," she said without preamble, "was more than just a healer. She was a guardian of the Great Circle, a keeper of balances that most of us have forgotten even exist. And I..." Her voice caught. "I was supposed to be her successor." The old elder sat beneath his iroko tree, cowrie shells scattered before him in patterns that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of the eye. He gestured for them to sit. "It's time you knew the full truth," he said, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "About your grandmother, about the shadow dealers, and about why these gifts were given to you both." He reached into a carved wooden box beside him and pulled out an ancient book bound in leather that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "This was your grandmother's journal. She left it in my keeping, knowing this day would come." As he opened the book, the air around them grew still, as if nature itself was listening. The sisters sat close together, their gifts pulsing in harmony as Baba Mosswood began to read. "My dearest granddaughters, if you are reading this, then the shadows have begun to move again, and my gifts have awakened in your hands. There is so much I wished I could have told you while I lived, but some truths can only be understood when they are needed most. The shadow dealers were not always our enemies. Long ago, they too were guardians, keepers of necessary darkness that balanced the light. But fear corrupted them, turned their purpose from preservation to control. They began to feed on the denied truths and buried dreams of our people, growing stronger with each generation that chose safety over growth, tradition over transformation. I was part of a circle of women who fought against their influence. We used seeds of truth and mirrors of revelation to help people face their fears and reclaim their power. But the shadow dealers were cunning. They didn't attack us directly, instead, they worked slowly, patiently, turning the village against change, making people fear their own potential for growth. One by one, my sisters in the circle fell. Not to violence, but to doubt, to pressure, to the thousand small compromises that eventually add up to surrender. Your mother-in-law, Aduk, was to be my successor. She had such potential, such fire. But the shadow dealers fed her fears until she turned away from her calling. I knew then that we needed a new approach. The old ways of fighting, one guardian against the darkness, were no longer enough. We needed something different. Something the shadow dealers wouldn't expect. That's why I chose both of you, my darlings. Not one guardian, but two. Not identical gifts, but complementary ones. The seeds need the mirror to know where to grow, and the mirror needs the seeds to change what it reflects. But there is more you must know. The gifts I gave you are only half of what you need. Hidden in this compound, beneath the roots of the iroko tree, lies a chest containing the other half of your inheritance. But it can only be opened when both gifts are ready, when both sisters are truly one in purpose. Baba Mosswood closed the journal gently. The chest she speaks of has waited all these years. Many have tried to open it, but it resists all attempts. The shadow dealers? Amara asked. They've tried many times, the old man nodded. It's why they watch this place so carefully. They fear what's inside, what your grandmother left to counter their power. Mama Aduk spoke up, her voice stronger now. I remember the chest. Mama Coco showed it to me once, long ago. But even then, I was too afraid to help her open it. The sisters looked at each other, understanding flowing between them like a current of light. Together, they stood and walked to the massive Iroko tree. Its roots spread out like ancient fingers grasping the earth, and between them, barely visible, was a small mound marked with symbols that matched those on Zora's mirror. As they approached, their gifts began to glow brighter than ever before. The seeds in Amora's pouch felt like living flames against her skin, while Zora's mirror vibrated with energy. Together, Zora whispered, taking her sister's hand. They knelt before the mound, and as their gifts touched the earth simultaneously, the ground began to shift and move, revealing a chest made of wood so dark it seemed to absorb light. Symbols carved into its surface glowed with the same light as their gifts. But before they could reach for it, shadows began to gather at the edges of the compound. The shadow dealers had been watching, waiting for this moment. You would unleash what should stay buried, their voices hissed from the darkness. You would disturb the order we have maintained for generations. No, Amora said firmly, holding her seeds high. We would restore the balance you destroyed. Growth and preservation, change and tradition, they were meant to work together, not fight each other. Zora raised her mirror, its surface blazing with reflected light. You aren't preserving tradition, you're strangling it. True tradition is like a living tree, always growing while staying rooted in what matters most. The shadows surged forward, but they couldn't approach the chest. The combined light from the sisters' gifts created a barrier they couldn't cross. The chest, Baba Mosshood called out urgently. Open it now, before they gather more strength. Together, the sisters placed their gifts against the chest's ancient wood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like distant singing, the chest began to open, revealing its long-hidden contents. Inside lay two items that made both sisters catch their breath, a small golden bell that seemed to ring without being touched, and a staff made of twisted wood that glowed with its own inner light. The bell of beginning and the staff of seasons, Mama Aduk whispered in awe. Mama Coco used to speak of them, but I thought they were just stories. The shadow dealers' voices rose in anger and fear. Those were meant to stay hidden. The old power was too strong, too dangerous. No power is too dangerous when balanced with wisdom, Aisha's voice rang out as she appeared beside the sisters. Your grandmother knew this. It's why she chose both of you, one to ring the bell that awakens truth, one to wield the staff that guides growth. As the sisters reached for their new gifts, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. For in this moment, beneath an ancient tree in a humble compound, something long broken was finally ready to be made whole again. The hidden truth was revealed at last, but with it came new questions, new challenges. For the shadow dealers were right about one thing: power this deep, this ancient, would change everything. The storm was about to break in earnest, the moment Amora's hand closed around the golden bell of beginning and Zora grasped the staff of seasons. The world around them transformed. The air crackled with ancient power, and the shadows surrounding Baba Mosshood's compound writhed in fury and fear. Finally, Aisha breathed, her indigo robe swirling with renewed energy. The circle can be restored. But the shadow dealers weren't retreating. Instead, they began to coalesce into forms more solid than before, shapes of men and women from the village, each one carrying the weight of denied dreams and buried truths. Among them were faces the sisters recognized, elders who had turned away from change, parents who had forced their children to abandon their gifts, leaders who had chosen power over wisdom. You think these trinkets make you powerful? The shadows sneered with many voices. We are the weight of generations. We are the comfort of certainty. We are what your people chose when change frightened them. The bell in Amora's hand began to ring of its own accord, its clear tone cutting through the shadows' words like sunlight through mist. In response, Zora's staff blazed brighter, its light revealing the true forms of those possessed by shadow, not monsters, but people trapped in their own fears. "Look," Mama Aduk said suddenly, pointing to the ground between the sisters. Where their combined light fell, something was beginning to grow, not just the small, glowing plant from the previous night, but a whole garden of luminous flowers, each one carrying a different memory, a different truth long denied. "The bridge," Aisha explained quickly. "Your grandmother spoke of it, the bridge between what was and what could be. You must build it now, before the shadows consume more souls." Understanding flowed between the sisters like water finding its level. Amora raised the bell higher, its ringing growing stronger, while Zora planted the staff firmly in the earth. Between them, the garden of light continued to spread. But the shadow dealers had one last weapon to deploy. From their midst stepped forward a figure that made both sisters' hearts stop, their grandmother, or something wearing her form like an ill-fitting mask. "My disappointed daughters," the false Mama Coco said, her voice a twisted version of the warm tones they remembered. "Would you undo all the careful work of generations? Would you destroy the peace we've built with your reckless dreams of change?" Zora's hand trembled on the staff, and Amora's bell faltered in its ringing. For a moment, doubt crept in like morning frost, threatening to kill the garden growing between them. Then Mama Aduk stepped forward, the small glowing plant from the hospital now blooming fully in her cupped hands. "No," she said firmly. Mama Coco would never speak against growth. Against hope. The real peace isn't built on fear, it's built on truth, no matter how difficult that truth might be. The false grandmother's form flickered, revealing the shadows within. But they weren't done yet. More figures emerged from the darkness, every person who had ever made the sisters doubt themselves, every voice that had told them to be less than they were. "The bridge," Aisha urged again. "Complete it now." "But how?" The sisters looked at each other across the growing garden of light, remembering all that had brought them to this moment. The market stall and the quiet house. The seats and the mirror. The long night in the hospital and the dawn that followed. Every step that had led them here, every choice that had shaped their path. Then Amora remembered something from their grandmother's journal: the seeds need the mirror to know where to grow, and the mirror needs the seeds to change what it reflects. "Zara," she called to her sister. "Show me where to plant." Understanding dawned in Zora's eyes. She raised her mirror, now amplified by the staff of seasons, and in its surface appeared images of every person in the village who needed healing, needed truth, needed growth. The mirror showed not just who they were, but who they could become. Amora began to ring the bell in a complex rhythm, each note calling to her remaining seeds. As they fell, guided by the mirror's reflections, they sprouted instantly into plants of light, each one a truth finally ready to bloom. The garden between the sisters grew larger, its light more intense. Where the luminous plants touched the shadows, they didn't fight them, instead, they transformed them, turning darkness into fertile soil for new growth. "No," the shadow dealers howled, but their voices were weaker now. "You destroy everything." "Not destroy," Zara said firmly. "Transform. Like the seasons transform the world without breaking it. Like truth transforms fear without denying it," Amora added, the bell's song growing stronger. The garden between them had become a bridge of pure light, and as the sisters stepped onto it from either side, they finally understood the full scope of their grandmother's wisdom. She hadn't divided her gifts to separate them, but to show them, and through them, the whole village, that different paths could lead to the same truth. As they met in the middle of the bridge, their combined gifts created a surge of power that lit up the pre-dawn sky like a second sun. The shadow dealers' forms began to dissolve, not into darkness this time, but into dawn mist, their component parts returning to those they had possessed. Around them, the village was awakening, drawn by the light and the bell's clear tones. People emerged from their houses, blinking in wonder at the bridge of light and the garden of truth blooming in Baba Mosswood's compound. Remember, Aisha's voice came to them on the morning wind. The bridge must be maintained. Truth must be tended. Growth must be guided. This is not an ending, but a beginning. The sisters stood together at the center of their bridge, their gifts working in harmony to maintain what they had built. The bell of beginning rang out clear notes of possibility, while the staff of seasons pulsed with the promise of constant, healthy change. Mama Aduk approached the bridge, her small plant now a strong sapling in her hands. I understand now, she said softly. Why she chose you both. Why she gave you different gifts. The strongest bridges are built from both sides. As the sun finally rose over Nyota, its light merged with the glow of the sisters' bridge, creating something new and beautiful and true. The shadow dealers were gone, but their lesson remained: change was not the enemy of tradition, and growth was not the destroyer of roots. For in this place where ancient wisdom had found new soil and buried truths had finally bloomed, something precious had been restored. Not just the bond between sisters, but the bridge between what was and what could be. The garden continued to grow, each plant a testimony to a truth faced, a fear transformed, a dream reclaimed. And in the heart of it all stood two sisters, their gift working together to ensure that what had been broken would stay mended, what had been buried would find light, and what had been separated would remain bridged. The dawn wind carried the bell's notes far and wide, calling all who were ready to cross the bridge between shadow and light, between fear and growth, between what they were and what they could become. One full cycle of the moon had passed since the dawn when two sisters built a bridge of light in Baba Mosswood's compound. Nyota had changed in ways both subtle and profound, like a garden slowly coming into bloom. The hospital in Kotu had released Jabari, who now walked with a slight limp but an unbowed spirit. The house he had dreamed of building for Zora was finally taking shape at the edge of the village, its windows positioned to catch both sunrise and sunset. But it wasn't just a home anymore, it was becoming something more. A place of healing, Zara explained to the growing number of visitors who came seeking wisdom. She would sit with them in the new courtyard, her grandmother's mirror, now paired with the staff of seasons, helping them see the truth of their paths. Meanwhile, Amara's market stall had transformed as well. Between the fruits and vegetables grew small, luminous plants sprouted from her grandmother's seeds, each one tended by someone who had found the courage to face their buried truths. The bell of beginning hung from the stall's central post, ringing soft notes of encouragement when someone was ready for change. On this particular morning, as mist rose from the earth like dreams taking flight, the sisters met in what had once been Baba Mosswood's compound. The old elder had passed peacefully in his sleep a week before, but not before seeing his life's work bear fruit in ways he had never imagined. He knew, Mama Aduk said, joining them beneath the Iroko tree. He knew this day would come. She had become a bridge herself, between the old ways and the new, between tradition and transformation. The small plant that had sprouted from Amora's seed now grew as tall as a young tree beside her house, its light a beacon for others seeking change. The shadow dealers, Zara began, touching the staff of seasons thoughtfully. They are not completely gone, are they? Aisha appeared beside them, her indigo robes rippling in the morning breeze. No, she confirmed. Shadows can never be completely banished, nor should they be. But they've been transformed, returned to their original purpose. To remind us of what we fear, Amora said, understanding dawning, so we can choose to grow through it. The garden that had sprouted between them during their final battle now covered much of the compound. Each plant glowed with its own inner light, each flower told its own story of truth faced and fear transformed. But more importantly, people from the village came here daily to tend the garden, each one planting their own seeds of change. Your grandmother would be proud, Aisha said softly. But not surprised. She saw this possibility long ago, when she chose to divide her gifts between you. As if in response, both the bell and staff pulsed with warm light. The sisters had learned to read these signals over the past month. Someone was coming who needed their help. Around the corner came a young girl, no more than 12, clutching a small mirror of her own. Behind her walked her mother, worry etched on her face. "She sees things in the mirror," the mother explained. "Things that frighten me. She talks of changes coming, of paths untaken." Zora smiled, recognizing the look in the girl's eyes, the same look she must have had when she first received her grandmother's mirror. "She sees true, then." Amora reached into her pouch and brought out one of the few original seeds she had left. Over the past month, they had discovered that the luminous plants could produce seeds of their own, but these first ones, their grandmother's last gift, held special power. "Would you like to plant a truth?" she asked the girl kindly. The child nodded, her eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Together, they found a spot in the garden where no light yet bloomed. The girl placed the seed in the earth with hands that trembled with excitement rather than uncertainty. As she did, Zara held up her mirror, enhanced by the staff of seasons, showing the girl not just her reflection, but her potential. Amora rang the bell of beginning softly, its note calling to the seed, encouraging it to grow. The mother watched in amazement as a new plant broke through the soil, its lighter color they hadn't seen before in the garden, a deep, rich purple that seemed to hold all the possibilities of twilight. "You see," Mama Aduk said to the worried mother. "The old wisdom doesn't die. It grows new branches, bears new fruit, finds new voices." More villagers began to arrive, as they did every morning now. Some came to tend their own plants of truth, others to seek guidance from the sisters, and some simply to sit in the garden and let its light heal what shadows still lingered in their hearts. Jabari appeared at the compound's entrance, leaning on his walking stick but standing tall. In the months since his accident, he had become a different kind of leader in the village, not through force or tradition, but through understanding and acceptance. "The elders' council meets today," he announced. "They want to discuss making this place official, a garden of second chances, they're calling it. A place where tradition and transformation can grow together." The sisters exchanged glances, remembering their grandmother's words from her journal: "The seeds need the mirror to know where to grow, and the mirror needs the seeds to change what it reflects." "It's already official," Aisha said with a quiet smile. "It has been since the moment two sisters chose to build a bridge instead of a wall." As the sun climbed higher, its light mixing with the gentle glow of countless truth plants, the sisters settled into their daily routine. Zara began working with those who needed to see their true reflections, while Amora helped others plant their own seeds of change. Between them, the garden continued to grow, each new plant a testament to the power of facing fear with love, of meeting shadow with understanding. The bell of beginning rang soft notes of possibility throughout the day, while the staff of seasons pulsed with the promise of constant, healthy change. The bridge they had built at dawn a month ago had become more than just a symbol, it had become a way of life. For in this place where sisters had learned to combine their gifts, where shadows had been transformed into soil for new growth, where truth and tradition had found a way to dance together, something precious had been preserved even as it changed. The old wisdom lived on, not as a rigid set of rules, but as a growing garden of second chances. Each day brought new visitors, new truths, new opportunities for transformation. And at the heart of it all stood two sisters, their gift working in harmony to ensure that what had been healed would stay healed, what had been awakened would stay awake, and what had been bridged would stay connected. As evening approached, casting long shadows that now brought comfort rather than fear, Amora and Zora stood together in their garden of second chances. Above them, the Iroko tree swayed gently, its leaves whispering ancient secrets to anyone ready to listen. "Do you think we've done what she hoped we would?" Zora asked softly, looking at their grandmother's mirror, now marked with the same symbols that adorned the staff of seasons. Amora touched the bell of beginning, feeling its warm response. "I think we've done something better," she replied. We've done what she knew we could. For in this land where magic still danced between shadow and light, where wisdom still grew in the gardens of possibility, two sisters had learned the greatest truth of all, that love, like light, only grows stronger when shared, and that the best bridges are built by those who dare to cross them together. The garden continued to grow, each plant a story, each light a promise, each truth a seed of change waiting to bloom in its own perfect season.